when I was closing the door.
You must have had a little intuition.
I did, I feel like there was a, yeah, because all of a sudden it was like, bing, I gotta close the door.
We're good?
Good, there we go.
All right, we'll call the meeting to order then. Now, you've had a chance maybe to glance at the agenda. Does anybody have any pecuniary interest to declare?
I don't have an agenda.
Oh, you don't have an agenda?
There we go.
Okay, all right, does everybody have an agenda? All right. We are then looking at the agenda. I would point out that in adjournment, we are not probably adjourning as the planning advisory committee. We'll be adjourning eventually as the downtown, whatever, service location review committee. So you could make that change. Any other amendments to the agenda? All right, would somebody like?
I'll move acceptance of the agenda.
All right, and seconded by? Andrea. Now, the minutes of the meeting about 2 years ago are attached and should be the second item in your agenda package. You probably haven't, some of you had a chance to look them over yet. But do you want to just quickly look, or were we going to, they'll be generally reviewed as you do your introduction, what they did.
Well, so through the chair, I probably won't review the minutes. So really the last meeting when we met, it was committee orientations. We reviewed the scope of the committee's mandate from council and then the public engagement plan. And so tonight, what we'll be asking the committee to do is to act on that public engagement and feedback that we received. So that really was your meeting from a year and a half ago.
Okay, so does anybody feel comfortable moving the acceptance of these minutes? Fern, seconded by Paul, thank you. Okay, where are we here? Great, is that it? We're ready for reports, are we?
Okay, so through the chair to the committee members, I apologize for those of you who did not receive the email from my staff member with the agenda. Typically what happens is it's sent directly to me and then everybody's BCC just so it to make it more efficient so it doesn't get caught in your junk mail, but that must have happened. So what I'll do is I originally planned just to not actually go over much of the background portion of this of my report, but what I will do is I'll just touch on a few things just to be helpful for everybody who's here tonight. So yeah, it has been a year and a half, and I don't typically make promises, but I don't think it'll be a year and a half until we have our next meeting. It has been busy, and we put this project on pause for what we believe to be a couple of necessary reasons. We had completed the public engagement of this for the project in around April or May of 2023. At that same time, the library CEO and I had a conversation that it'd be really helpful to know what the library would be seeking in terms of short-term space needs, because it really does factor into this project. And one of the things that I've always kept front and center in my mind was that the library was one of the only stakeholders who was coming into this project with a documented space need through their 2017 master plan. So the library did make an attempt through 2023 to sort themselves out on a space need. They weren't able to come to a resolution, so we took a bit of I call it cooling off period for a few months. And then the facilities department worked with the library board earlier this year, so through January and February, to go through a more standardized process that we've used in the past for some of our new buildings, like the fire hall. And then they came forward and blessed the need. That combined with the fact that the project sits at my desk every day. Has really caused the delay in the last year and a half. And which is, if you haven't read the report, haven't had the benefit of the report, is the reason why we brought in a project manager in Angela Graham to help me out and move this forward. So in terms of some of the key things that have happened last year that have shaped this, so the library has sorted themselves out on a space need. We've finished the public consultation portion of the project and gotten a lot of really good feedback from the public Albeit it was definitely more through the lens of the original project scope. Meaning that we wanted to look at how services were oriented in the downtown. It was this project at one point in time was a lot more operational in nature. In that last year and a half, we've done a couple of things. So Service Ontario has now moved down to the MOC building. That was something that the province always wanted us to do, is to co-locate, and it made the most sense to bring it here. We've staffed up in our clerks department after the cyber attack, so that factors in. Renovating town hall actually is actually having more of an impact on this downtown service project than I think any of us had anticipated. A number of us, actually all of us, moved to town hall. And some of us came back, but some other staff actually stays located in the places that they moved to. So really, a lot of that conversation that we were expecting the community to have at one point in time about, what's the most efficient way to organize our services? Where should we put this? Where should we put that? That very operational in nature kind of thought process is now been eliminated. I'd say that from an administrative perspective and a council perspective, we're quite happy with how we now deliver services from the MOC and the town hall. So I brought a report forward to council in May of this year, explaining that to them. And what council did was they actually narrowed the scope of this project. But by narrowing it, I think it made it more of a meaningful project in a way. So now council's mandate to the committee is that they'd like the committee to look at just 5 James Street North, which is our train station, as well as 14 Church Street, and go through that process of receiving the feedback from the public, receiving the feedback from the stakeholders that we've had talked to through the process, and go through that more strategic visioning process to decide what goes in both of those buildings. So I think from the committee's perspective, I hope you'll find that to be a much more interesting project than kind of a day-to-day operating project that we thought about this before. So that really frames a bit of tonight's meeting as well. Out of tonight, so all that to say, that's kind of how we got to here. I picked up the project again in September, so we had some meetings with A-Link, who is the architect who's going to help us with eventually designing concept plans. And they worked with our internal staff to present to them all of the feedback that you'll see consolidated in my staff report. And then work through a refresh with my staff to help them just with a simple visioning exercise of understanding what's changed since we worked on this a year ago, and then what we could then also see going into the 2 buildings. Where was I going with that? Then we got ourselves into October and November, and again, it's the project's delayed, and that's the point in time where I made the decision we need to hire a project manager. What's also going on right now is a feasibility review for the station gallery. So Angela, to my right here, is she's the consultant we've hired to do that feasibility review for the station gallery. And when I was doing my stakeholder interview with Angela, we just naturally got to talking about what was going to happen at 14 Church Street, and I realized that the process she was going through with the station gallery was just so naturally aligned with the 14 Church Street, especially what's going to go into that in the future, and how we're going to use the train station, that we couldn't do the 2 projects independently. That would make the most sense to have a person like Angela then kind of steer this project and really facilitate the conversation at the committee level. And I think in all fairness to myself, I don't think I was probably fully equipped to navigate that conversation with the committee, because that's just not my background. Where Angela brings to the table a cultural background, working for Lord Consulting, having run galleries before, she's going to be able to help you folks walk through that visioning exercise. So Angela and I have met with A-Link, and we've developed what we believe is a critical path of all the key next steps in this project, with the goal of having it completed by sometime in the second quarter of 2025. And you'll see attached to the report and in agendas, what we see is some of those key next steps. What you won't see is timelines attached to each step, because we plan on working with A-Link in early January to actually assign timelines to each of those tasks. But what A-Link would like out of tonight is a summary of the committee's feedback, and then they can start understanding how much work they have to do to get us into the next step. So for tonight's meeting, what the plan was for the committee to go through to consider all of the feedback we've received through the public survey, through staff's ideas, through just some of the ancillary work that's happened on the site, so library space needs, hear from Angela about what's going on with the library or the station gallery. And then even the recreation master plan, it's matured to a point now where I can give you some information from the draft that talks about how the public sees us using our downtown spaces. And really what our idea is tonight is A-Link has considered all of that as well. And they've developed this. So this is, I'm gonna hand this out once I get up, but they've created this little chart, and this is called a use matrix. And they, through all of the feedback that they have considered from public, from staff, and from others, they've developed what they believe are the key themes under this column called use or air, called use. For tonight, what we're asking from the committee is essentially, are you happy with this list? Do you think anything should be added, or do you think anything should be taken off? We're not to the point where we're going to take a use and assign it to a specific space yet, because that's really what we would do in the next step. So the plan out of tonight is if this list gets larger or if it gets smaller, we then say to A-Link, here's the list as vetted by the committee. And then A-Link's job is to develop at least 2 concepts for the committee to consider in the next step, where you would then just decide whether or not you're happy with where they think things should be placed in each building. He blesses that, it goes to council. If council blesses that, then that's where A-Link will actually start doing the floor plans and designs for us. And the final part of this project will be bring those draft floor plans and costing back to the committee and have you choose one to recommend the council. So that's how we got to where we are tonight. And that's really what the deliverable and the goal is for tonight's meeting. And with any luck, that's all you have to worry about hearing from me, because Angela is, like I said, much better equipped to navigate the conversation with you. But I would just encourage everybody to think of tonight as visioning, and really we want to gather your feedback on whether or not A-Link got the summary list correct, or whether there's other things that we think could be located in either of those 2 buildings. Again, if you think it's reasonable, we'll put it on the list, and then the prioritization and deciding what goes where really will happen in the next step. So that's my very quick 2-minute preamble. Now I pass it on to Angela.
No, I did not. I don't think you thought you had a copy.
Not even on a staff report. Okay, so we had an epic fail then on the agenda. I really apologize for that.
Sorry.
Sorry.
That's really small.
Yeah, I know it's ended awkward.
Thank you.
I apologize.
I just have a question for you, for the
Sure.
library, the 4,000 square feet, does that include the basement?
For 14 Church Street,
Yeah,
14 Church Street, 4,000 square feet per floor.
per floor, okay.
Yes, so now that we've got it opened up, it is roughly 4,000 square feet per floor, so we'll have 2 floors there total. And just rule of thumb, we'll lose around 25% once you start adding hallways and walls. And we haven't really factored in the basement as usable space at 14 Church Street.
So you're talking about 6,000 square feet of usable space then?
So yeah, around that.
Okay.
Yeah, so very large building.
Thank you.
So I think I'll start by just giving you a little bit about my background, so you know who I am. And then if you can sort of hear me, since I don't know some of you, if we could just quickly go around and you can tell me who you are and sort of why you're here and what your interests are in this process. So as Brett said, my name is Angela Graham. I spent my background working in arts and culture. I've got a bachelor's degree in art history, a master's degree in anthropology, and an MBA, and a almost finished PhD, which got aborted, which was looking at community and culture, basically, and it's focused that in New Orleans. But I spent most of my career working in Canada and the United States in small regional contemporary art galleries mostly, and other arts organizations. And I'm really interested in that sort of intersection between community and arts. And it just sort of happened in most of my career. I've worked in older historic buildings as the art gallery setting. So I'm quite experienced in how you revitalize historic spaces for different uses, particularly arts and cultural spaces. I got involved, so I got a bit of a cold, I'm getting over cold. I don't have, I'm not contagious anymore. So my voice is kind of cracking into white water. I got involved in this project because Cameron, as you all know, is leaving or is retiring from the Station Gallery. And he was looking for a successor. And he approached me amongst a number of other people to see if I was interested in taking over. And I had a lot of questions because I've done this for a long time. And so in asking some of my questions, I got led to town staff here to try and answer some of my questions. And it was decided that I would sort of take on more of a facilitation feasibility study role as opposed to just working with Cameron and taking over the gallery. And look at what is the best future for the gallery. As you may or may not know, Cameron has sort of a MOU with the town to run the gallery. It's not a formal nonprofit, it's not a business, it's just, it's existing as an art gallery, which is,
What are those three letters mean? That's,
a memorandum of understanding.
thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Yes.
Report.
Yeah, no, it's an agreement, right? So
Thank you.
Cameron had an agreement with the town for both the use of the space and for a small grant every year, which has allowed him to continue. And I think we can all recognize that Cameron has done a phenomenal job of keeping the Station Gallery going for 8 or 9 years with very limited resources and an absolute insurmountable amount of volunteer effort and passion. So, Cameron needs to be congratulated, recognized, all those things. But we need to figure out what happens now. You can't, galleries can't survive on $10,000 a year. They can't survive on somebody that is working there 30-something hours a week for a nominal amount that he takes as an honorarium every year. So how do you keep the gallery sustainable in this community? And does the community want a gallery? So I met with Cameron, I've been going through all the records that he has. And I've been doing stakeholder interviews around the town and with other people in other regions, looking at what do people want and what is feasible in this community. And I'm sort of working on going through all my data right now. But what I am finding is that there definitely is an interest in some sort of visual arts gallery in this community. There's two kind of needs. There's one that people want to see an art gallery that is run professionally and is bringing exhibitions in and the town can be proud of. There's another need of something that is a community, a place where the community can come together. So kind of like a cultural hub kind of idea, a place where you're not just doing exhibitions, where you can have workshops, you can have lectures, the community can be there. And maybe have an extra space where local artists can show. Local artists aren't, which has surprised me actually. Local artists aren't as interested in having the Station Gallery as a place for their work. They would rather have work that is brought in from outside that they can look at and inspire them and see what's going on in the broader art world. But there is a need for some sort of space where they can show periodically or that they can be recognized by the community. But there really isn't desire for a space that the community can feel is their kind of cultural home. And one thing that I noticed and I've heard echoed in a lot of interviews is that St. Mary's is interesting in that you've got a really grassroots, kind of homegrown creative community that a lot of communities don't have. Like you compare that to Stratford, which is where I live right now, but is very dominated by the festival. And that brings a lot of really amazing things to the community. But what you've got here is you've got a lot of entrepreneurs and artists that have started something and it's been allowed to flourish in this community. You've got the Stonetown Arts Group that has been around for what, 20-something years and has has consistently kind of had 40-something members. And that's amazing. Like most communities don't have something like that. And it's, grassroots, self-run, they don't get a lot of funding from anyone else. They just kind of make it work because they love arts and they love being together and they love doing something in the community. You look at your Main Street and you've got Zenfire Pottery, you've got Paint and Palette that offers classes, you've got Stone Home Creatives, you've got, what, 3 quilting stores in town? One that's on the main street and 2 that are in people's homes around town, and somebody told me 4 quilt guilds. You've got, you've got a lot of, and I'm missing things, but there's a number of little creative businesses and creative groups that have started here and have flourished in this community. And one thing that people would like to see is a place for them all to not necessarily physically come together, but something that holds them all together. So one of the things that I'm looking at that will be in one of the options that I'm going to present in my feasibility study is it an art gallery that the community needs, or is it an arts council or something that also has a gallery? So something that allows the arts to come together or the creatives to come together, but you also have the physical space where you can show art. So I haven't exactly figured that out, but it's sort of like all the people I'm listening to, there's definitely a need for something creative and a desire to support, continue to support this kind of creative energy that you have developed in this community. And that people feel, one of the things that I keep hearing is that that could be very much the identity for St. Mary's and especially the downtown, is that this could be sort of a visual arts. And I'm using visual arts loosely, not just in like fine paintings kind of thing, but visual arts as in people that are using visual media to create creative pursuits. So whether it is quilting or candle making or pottery or drawing, painting, whatever. But you could create this identity of making St. Mary's a destination for things like that. So I think that I'm still working on formalizing this feasibility study, but I think that that ethos kind of plays into what we're here to do today. And how we look at both at the station and at 14 Church Street. So I'm gonna quit talking for a minute and I'm just gonna ask you to quickly sort of introduce yourselves and say why you're here and why this interests you.
Well, I'm Paul King. I actually live in London right now, but I lived here for a quarter of a century. And I was quite interested in the Station Gallery. I bought paintings from there and I bought paintings from other artists in town. And I've been involved in the heritage field for, I guess, a quarter of a century. The house that I had here was a heritage house, and I'm still involved with, there's Community Heritage Ontario, which is a provincial heritage organization, and also the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario. I'm involved with their policy committee and things like that. So, and I have quite a large collection of paintings and sculptures and things like that. So I'm very interested in this kind of thing and what works in this town. This St. Mary's is a fantastic place, and it is in part because of these things that are going on. And I mean, I know a number of people who in town who were painters or, they're involved in the art scene or something like that. It's really quite spectacular, really. So it'd be nice to see something that sort of fits.
So I'm Barb Tudor. Sorry. I've lived in St. Mary's for 36 years, so still a newcomer. But in the same house for the last 36 years, which is on Church Street, at Church Street South, so like 2 blocks away from the project. I have always had an interest in history and in culture and in heritage. I was on the downtown, I can't remember what the name was, but it's now part of the Heritage Committee. So, preserving the heritage of our downtown core, I think that was really important. I'm on the library board and have been for a number of years. So I am also here as a champion of the library. I'm a firm believer in libraries as being a community hub. So somewhat similar to how you see art galleries, but
I think that
I think a library can be the heart of the community. I think a healthy community leads to healthy outcomes for everyone in the community, and I think libraries are critical to that. But I certainly see a good blending of your vision for culture. And I always get a little worried when I talk about rec and leisure because it makes it sound like those are frivolous things that, or add-ons if we have a chance, but actually they're really important, crucial parts of the healthy community.
Yeah, I'm Al Stratton and I'm on council, of course, so I'm here with the interest of, I see this project as a chance of creating a better community hub, also creating some efficiencies for the town that we've talked about for a number of years, and also saving a critical building in the town, and you know, it's a wonderful opportunity for the town, but from my view, I think there's an opportunity because this will be a big project for the town, so we want input from the rest of the community as to how we move forward and how we can help us enhance the downtown, which is part of the reason we made the investment so far.
Yes, I'm Fern Fridham. I'm also a member of council and lived in the area all my life. I'm a local realtor, 30+ years in the business doing that. I've been involved in fires and painting and all kinds of craft endeavors and community theater. And so arts is important. I'm really quite aware that the town has a huge tourist potential, but I feel it has yet to be realized. And I would like to see that somehow incorporated within whatever we do to support our downtown and the downtown businesses that are, you know, that are the backbone of our community, really. We need them, so thank you.
Mary Smith, for many, many years, I was the curator at the St. Mary's Museum, so I do have a strong interest in history and in heritage buildings. I was also very much involved with the Heritage Committee, and I have always, I think I probably started going to the library when I was about 4 years old, and that was quite a while ago. I think I'd like to know more about some of the stories that helped create St. Mary's, some of the people that lived here. I have a column that I do regularly for the St. Mary's Independent, it's a weekly newspaper. And I'm always learning new and interesting things, and I'm building up a base for blackmail.
She's not joking.
Her column
but-
is the one that people go to the most in the paper.
Well, I don't know about that, but anyway.
It's true.
But, we go for booze of the week, actually, first.
Yeah, you're right.
But anyway, no, I think this is a wonderful project. I was so pleased when the town decided to purchase the building. It has an amazing history. It doesn't look like all that much, really, from the Church Street perspective, but there's been, it's been a very important corner for the town, and I'm glad that it's going to continue to do so, and I think that there's a lot of potential, and I'm glad you're exploring it.
Thank you.
I'm John Hurdle. I am probably the newest comer to the town. I lived in Stratford for about 35 years. Moved here about 5 years ago. And I became interested in the project. I recently retired from Wilfrid Laurier. I was the manager of the performance facilities, live performance facilities there. Moved to St. Mary's in preparation for retirement, and then retired. I saw a call for community members at large to be a member of this committee, and wanted to become wanted to contribute something to my new town.
Fantastic.
And I'm Andrea Mackel. I've lived in St. Mary's now for 21 years. Neat. I live right down the hill from Barb. And my husband and I own a business in the downtown and we live above it. In addition to that, I am a downtown person. I walk everywhere downtown, but I've also worked with our BIA in marketing and promotion. I worked for the town of St. Mary's as an events coordinator. And again, doing things in the downtown, bringing tourists ideally to the downtown. That got a little sidelined by the pandemic, but we soldiered on. But it's just, this is a really interesting project to me. This is creating something entirely new that's not initially purpose driven, like the operations center here, when this was built, we knew exactly what this was going to be. When the fire hall was renovated, we knew exactly what this was going to be, what that was going to be. This is a chance to create something very new and very collaborative, which I think is extremely important in a small town such as ours, that, to borrow a phrase from Brent, punches above its weight. That's the line. So, and to continue doing that, we need to work together and find unique solutions to delightful. I'm not going to call this a problem because this is an opportunity, but working together and building something new and collaborative that can benefit a broad array of people. I also sit on the Heritage Committee. I'm a bit of a conduit between that committee and this one. And to build something entirely new that's focused on possibly more creative uses is in a historic building is really, really cool. And that's why I'm here.
That's great. And I think that's a really great place for us to jump off, because I think that, you know, I mean, certainly everyone around this table, but certainly everybody that I've spoken to in town is excited about opportunity and community and creativity. And so I think that this is a great project. Like, you've got these two really sort of interesting buildings in the downtown vicinity that can be imagined in numerous ways. And that's a really exciting place to be. And I think you're really fortunate as citizens of this town that you've got town leaders that are willing to do this and are willing to move forward on that, because I think there's a lot of towns that just kind of get stuck on it. Or, you know, you look at what's happening at your neighbor to the north, with the discussions around the Grand Trunk that have been going on for who knows how long, and are just, you know, are moving forward very slowly. And, you know, having worked in that town and being part of things, I have not been at meetings that are where everyone's like this and wants to really see something exciting happen in a positive way. So not that there's not positive things happening there, but I think it's just really exciting that you're all here and you've got this opportunity, and the town is giving you this opportunity to do something with these two buildings and move the community forward. So that's great. So let's start with, and we've got sticky notes and papers and things if we want to kind of do that kind of a process. But let's just run through the list that we've got in front of us. And because that was the sort of list that came out of, you know, previous meetings and researches we've done so far. And sort of look at that. I mean, there's a number of library functions here. You know, the library non-collection, library offices, library adult learning space, space for the Friends of the Library. I think that's mostly for their storage for books for their sale and things. Library programming space, multi-purpose space, so large space for lectures, meetings, 50 people size. I've heard that from numerous people that that is something that's needed in this community, a place where groups can come for meetings, for lectures, for poetry readings, for workshops, for all kinds of things. That there definitely is a desire for multi-purpose space or meeting space. Tourism services, entrepreneurial suites, sort of co-working space. The art gallery, a place for local art display, performance space, market space, outreach space, commercial retail unit space, maker space, and that sort of could work with the library or gallery could sort of, you know, studio space could probably share that. Municipal office space and leasable tenant office space. That's a lot of uses for, basically we're looking at 8,000 maybe of usable space in between the two buildings. And we did bring floor plans of the two spaces so that not that we're space planning right now, but just so that you have an idea of the space we're working with. So you walk through the train station. So it's got, right now the gallery is using the two offices, the gallery, They haven't been using this space, although I understand that they're going to be able to test it out to see if they can use it for workshops and things. You do have to be a ticket office. And one of the big challenges for the gallery is that you've got this axis of movement that has to remain open for the via trains. So it kind of, it affects the way you can use the gallery space, or anything else can go in there right now. But we're not worrying about how we're gonna use the space, but that's basically the space we're looking at. This is the schematic of 14 Church. We don't have actual floor plans yet because right now it's a big open space, but just to sort of remind yourselves of the two buildings we're kind of thinking about looking at. So between and right now there's 4,000 square feet on the two floor, on all three floors in 14 Church. The basement, we're not really knowing what we're doing with that right now, or if it's gonna be usable space. And then there also is, you have to think about hallways, staircases, other things which take about 25% of the space away from those two. So we don't have a ton of space.
It's more like 6,000, right? You said 8,000, it's more like 6,000.
Well, yeah, you 6,000 usable, yeah,
And you take away the 25.
yeah, 8,000 total space, but 6,000 usable, correct. And then the train station is just under two.
Yeah, around 1,700.
Yeah, so just under 2,000 square feet, but again, you've got transportation access. So, you know, that's not a lot of space for all these uses, but still, we want to sort of think about, right now, we're sort of blue skying it still. We're not worrying about how much space anything's going to take or what we're going to use spaces for. I think the other interesting thing is that both libraries and art galleries are one of the remaining public free spaces that people can go to, that don't have, especially in like the AGO's got an entry fee, but for most small galleries in smaller towns, there's no fee to get in. Libraries don't have fees to get in. They're safe, accessible spaces for the public, and they have a lot of shared uses. So I think that, you know, if we got to the point where we wanted to have an art gallery, say, and a library in 14 Church Street, there are certain overlap uses, like a makerspace could also be studio space, or meeting space could be shared space. So that's why you can have a lot of things on this list, and they may be able to be multi-used, shared, whatever. So right now, we're not sort of worrying about the logistics of it. We're thinking about what do we really want to see? Like, what's important to us in our this community and in these spaces downtown.
Madam Chair, sorry.
I just had a quick question about the 5 library items. These are all items that the library has designs on moving to 14 Church?
Or that they have need for, yeah. That they would like more space for these different things, or they could use more space, yes. Because the library is short of, I mean, but you could probably answer this better than me.
Yeah, so there was a space and needs study done in 2017, so it's already somewhat dated. It said the library should have about 10,000 square feet. So I think we're about,
Just under 6,000.
yes, so
That includes basement.
that includes the basement. So I think there's only about 4,000 usable square feet in the library. So depending on how you look at it, there's sort of about 6,000 square feet. So I know that there's been discussions with the town, and I think we've been promised about 2,600 square feet from the project. So these are some of the things the library has identified, and there is something else that the library identified I don't see on here, and that is what I call private study space. So for example, you know, using the library as a study space, there is no private space in our library. I don't know if you've been in the library.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful building, but it really is very small what's usable. So for example, there is a program right now with mentors, like reading mentors. So where do you sit with your, you know, person that you're mentoring? You kind of need a private space for that. So that would, I think, be the only other thing that the library has sort of, you know, thought might be a good fit for 14 Church Street. I don't see on there.
Barb, can I just ask for clarity on how private, you mean like closed room or just like more of a carrel or?
I think, you know, more of a carol. I think you always want to be careful about closed rooms, right? Like, so there's all that issue as well, but yeah, just, you know, more of a, like, just a quieter study space for, but still having some conversation, right? So.
So there's zone space,
Yeah,
yeah,
so a little bit different than a big meeting space, for example.
right.
Anybody else? Is there anything on this list that is like a top priority that you think is a non-negotiable must-have?
I just want to clarify something. It's not a top priority, but the idea of outreach space is, that was, with regards to our social worker program in St. Mary's, just so everyone's aware, so that we do not have space to have like Ontario Works come and visit, or a space where our social worker will meet privately with people with certain needs. So that's the reason that's on the list. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's what that means, is that like potentially an office for Brittany, or potentially a place where, you know, they could go and have a private space, but also when we have things like Service Canada come, or you know, those type of things. A lot of communities have that, and we currently don't. And it often falls to the library sometimes. The library doesn't have a good space for that either.
So, yeah, I think that's something, again, the library sees as a community hub that we would want to see, as part of what the library offers, so. People, as you say, it's the only place you can go, or you have to pay, so people do see the library as a place that they can get information, but get services as well, so.
So a space like that, how often would it be needed? Like, would it be something that could be a meeting space, like a small meeting space / outreach office space, or are those two uses not compatible?
I'm not the expert on that.
I'm not the expert on that either, actually. I'm not going to defer to Brent. I would say yes, but Brent, I think you might chime in on that. Yeah.
In my view, it would be, so our community outreach worker doesn't need a private office every day. Again, the philosophy we've adopted in the last few years, and it's actually really interesting, it's reflected in the rec master plan now too, but is a flexible multi-use space, right? So I guess at the staff level, we've already identified a vision for the building, but that's just our vision. We kind of described it in the report, right? That you have a cultural hub on the first floor, and then the second floor is, you know, already kind of more, I guess what's hard, more chopped up space that is meeting rooms and more purpose built for that type of use. But then it's a meeting space where, yeah, Ontario Works could use it one day, a person could go study there the next day, Brittany can use it on the third day. And then in 20 years from now, when we have 2 more staff, it's easily transitioned into an office or something like that. So I think anything that's like multi-purpose and bulkable, that would work for, you know, from staff's view.
Yeah, I think flexibility is definitely the key. Just for the Friends of the Library, I think that they too envisioned, so I'm looking at commercial retail unit space, I think that you envisioned some kind of like like some Friends of the Libraries do, like a little
Gift shop.
yeah, a little gift shop and maybe a coffee shop kind of combined with that. I know that parents expressed some concerns about that, and we don't want to compete with our local bookstore, but I think when it's used, like I think when it's used books, I think it's considered kind of complimentary, so.
Yeah, I have also a little bit of a tricky time when we're competing against other coffee shops too. If we have like a cafe that's, you know, come on in and sit down and have a coffee at any time, and we've got businesses that are trying to survive selling coffee. Yeah.
And I think that is, I mean, I think that's something that, you know, when we get down, that next step down, is it, you know, something that we do need to think about, especially if we're interested in, you know, tourism and supporting downtown, and because you don't want, typically you don't want nonprofits or competing with the local businesses, right? You want to create a space where everybody can succeed, right? And your downtown, I mean, 14 Church isn't that far from the Snapping Turtle or the Flour Mill, or, you know, the bakeries or any of the other, Tim Hortons, right? Tim Hortons is right there. So, yeah, I think it is something that it's, yeah. But I think right now we're just sort of looking at, you know, what are the things that we really want to see and that are really important, and that, is there anything on here that you don't think is important?
Well, I'm wondering why, the police in the report, they're saying they need a meeting space or private space, but I don't see that on the list in any way, and is there a reason for that? Maybe Brad can know.
Yeah, so through the chair, I can speak to that. I think they would like confidential meeting space, but all in one location. So the reason it's not necessarily on the list to look at 14 Church Street or 5 James Street, it's still understood that they would like that. But if we freed up any space in town hall, we would then find a way to dedicate it to them. It's kind of our idea.
So they wouldn't be willing to look at moving to the train station or another location completely?
They're always willing. So we've had this conversation at our community policing advisory committee a number of times in the past. And the difficulty is any location they move to would be close to public walk-in traffic. Unless the town then funded an administrative assistant to be at the door. So I think the primary advantage with town hall, although town hall is not the perfect space for replacements, it is a little bit smaller. One of the primary advantages is that there's always somebody there during business hours that can greet a person coming through the door and then at least either guide them to the phone for the police or guide them right directly to an officer.
Brent's being kind, it's cost as well. The reality is there's a lot of regulations that come out with regards to police, and we don't want to create another police station, because if we do, it's gonna be cost like hundreds of thousands.
Normally I wouldn't do this. I don't like sitting with the committee, but.
Yeah, so the police thing is not simple. You know, if we expand the space too much, we're gonna start getting into a police, how people screen the whole thing. And right now, we're quite trying to do, and I'll say this publicly, and probably shouldn't, it forces the officers to interact with the staff, which is a great thing, actually, to be quite honest. If they were in a location by themselves, like when they're at the fire hall and so forth, it's great, they have their own space, but they don't interact with the public as much. And it's worked well for them, in my opinion. They don't like hearing that, that's the truth. The chief's on board with that. I can say, I don't speak for the chief, but I think the administration is, the officers, not so much.
So from priorities, I would say from the library's perspective, programming space would be the biggest need. So I don't know if you've ever gone to Tales for Tots, but like they take it to the library because there's so many that go. And that's something that is easily kind of severable from, you know, the main library operation. So I would say programming space would be the #1 priority. And again, that space that can be shared, right? So I mean, we don't run programs that like the whole time through, so that's definitely, but having a program space is, I would think, the top priority.
Okay.
I think it's also important to note that since the pandemic, the use of the PRC in space up there has become a premium. And we don't often think of that, but things like pickleball going and room use, and then us trying to do a few things like quilt shows and entrepreneurial things to bring people in the facility, means the space at the PRC has really become a premium. So having a space, like Barb alluded to, it's more of a community space that is a little bit flexible has become increasingly important, because often we're turning people away.
Oh, okay. Like what size groups you turn away?
Small groups, I think, you know.
Like, for example, the library used to have a camera club, but I think it outgrew the library. I don't know where it is now, but
I don't know.
Oh, the Presbyterian Church, I think.
did they?
Yeah, the clicks. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, there are groups that are meeting in the churches, but again, they would like a space that is feeling like it's sort of a community space.
And it's hard to grow your group if it's meeting in like a church, it's, you know, but if it's meeting in like a community hub, then other people see it and think, wow, that looks like.
On
a
the
really
other
fun
hand, a lot of the churches are quite happy to get the rental. And I think you have to be careful of that too. If you just, you can't, if you take, they really actually, it depends on, it means something to their budget to have regular rentals for the church groups as well. And the meeting rooms are quite welcoming. And certainly the one at the Presbyterian Church is a lovely place to meet. And I think it's quite central, the ones that meet at the Anglican Church too, in the parish hall. So you just have to be careful how about that too. That's just something else to keep in mind. I think, on the other hand, say something like the arts group that meets regularly at the Anglican Church would be very happy to be able to have an exhibit space for some of their work, that they could depend on too. So I think there's, I mean, lots of room to cooperate without. And the museum itself, we do a speaker series, and it's often, we have to restrict the number of people that can attend, because we really only have, there's only room for a couple dozen people to come. And it would be nice to have a regular space where we could have up to 50 people, I think.
Same with the libraries.
Yeah.
You know, like it takes place at the PRC, which can be a problem when the speaker thinks they're going to the library. And it's actually at the PRC, so
Yeah.
I think the programming space. A big problem though, why people like going to the PRC is. I think parking is just such a huge issue for. For our downtown.
Is it the same problem at night? If people are doing night, like if you're doing a lecture series, I'm guessing it's probably in the evening. Yes,
Yeah.
no?
Yeah.
I'd say it probably is, especially people who maybe have mobility issues.
Okay.
And question, if we're moving on from that point, questions about performance space and market space. Now, I sit on the farmers market board as well, and we do have a few indoor markets in the winter. And I'm wondering if that looking for more artisan market space, or is this sort of directed more toward farmers market interior space, or how are we defining market? And then also, how are we defining performance space? What size of performances, considering that we have a beautiful theater across the street kind of thing?
There was so. Not to cut you off, Angela.
Yes,
There was-
please.
There was something. I'm gonna speak a little bit, what the heck was it?
I thought I read somewhere that the market space, while you're looking for that.
Yeah. I was like,
Was for like, you know, sort of pop-up thing, like more, you know, small entrepreneurs that need kind of pop-up fostering entrepreneurial type things. So probably more artisan market space as opposed to farmer market space.
Right.
But again, I mean, you know, this is blue sky, what do we need, right? Do we need, I mean, is farmer market space something that's needed downtown? Like, should that be something that's on here? Or,
That's something I can take back to the board.
I think
Yeah,
the market's fine.
yeah, like I would make that, you know, since it's a very producer-driven market, very local in-season produce, it's to have that opportunity year, you know, a weekly space, as I'm seeing here under remaining comments, that's, I'm noticing it on page 22. Weekly markets for the farmers market isn't a priority.
right,
It's not, I'm sorry.
It is not,
It's not
because
Friday.
because we do have our weekly space when we're in season down at the flats.
Yeah,
So,
the town spent some money to kind of
yes,
fix that space up a little bit and make it more
oh yeah, it's part of the
user friendly.
larger project, so, yeah.
At one point, the town hall was part of this whole project, wasn't it? And looking at how space was used in the town hall.
Yeah, it's through the chair. So in the, when we first started looking at how we organize the space on the first level, so how we offered services at that first level was in scope. But I think what we realized is that just over time, with, again, a bit of a reorganization in our clerks department, and then when we moved out because of the renovation and staff, a number of staff came here and they stayed here because it's interesting, when you look at the adjacency matrix, like some of those natural synergies that started happening. So we, at the staff level, we felt that really coming to the committee to ask how we should organize our staff in the lower level of town hall at this point, when we're pretty happy with how it's organized right now, didn't really make any sense anymore. With the exception of that, if, you know, things like, if tourism became a big priority and it made a lot of sense to put tourism staff over at 14 Church Street, you know, then that just, when I talk about freeing up space for the police, that frees up space for the police. So I guess like when you look at some of these uses, it talks about tourism being across the street and, you know, being in a community hub. Again, there's a question of the committee, like, is that something that makes sense, right?
So I'm just wondering because of the point about it. So I'm like, is the community players they're still able to access the theater?
Oh, yes.
In the town
Yeah.
hall, so that's not.
Yeah, that theater's still there. It's still, again, purpose-built space that we see for that. I think when I was trying to find it in here, that's why I took a quick pause. I thought I read somewhere, for some reason, Black Box.
yeah, that's not.
Yeah, Black Box performance space. I'm not exactly sure what, I'm not in the performing arts, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but.
So it's a black box, and you could explain this as well, it's sort of,
Think of probably most people's high school theater class where that will be held. It's just chairs ideally raked
Yeah.
for seating and a space on the floor and maybe the ability to focus 15, 20 lights onto the performance space.
it's for people that want to do, I mean, a lot of workshopping, emerging theater companies, small theater companies, you know, theatrical readings. They don't need or want or can afford to rent a stage and the whole thing. They just want a place where they can maybe have 20 people. They can,
What strikes me about some of this list is how much, it's all a question of timing. How much time would a small theater group or poetry reading actually need in that if we're talking about black box theater, how much time would they actually need to set up? For a small, like I'm seeing a number of things that sort of, depending on what time demands they have in the space, the library, the added study space, the multi-purpose, the large one, the meeting space. There's another one in here that I thought, if these all happen at different times of the day through scheduling, one room or one space could work, the multi-purpose space for 50 people with a dividing wall, retractable dividing wall, that gives you your 4 to 6 person meeting space.
Yeah, I guess it's
There's
hard.
a lot of demands
it's
on
hard
not a lot of space, so if I'm starting to feel that the more you can share a space by groups, and then you come up with a priority list of who gets what timing and.
I think that's where you run into difficulties, right? Like the library, they say, well, we've been running this program for the last 30 years, so we want this time. And if that's every day, then, you know, then that's where you might run into difficulties, but I would think something like the black box space could easily be accommodated in the multi-purpose space.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's a very specific.
Yeah, I mean, you're not doing that very often. That's probably much more likely in the evening. So.
Turn the chairs around and there's your little.
Yeah,
thing.
so, but a lot of it is gonna, you know, one of the questions is who's gonna, if that's further down the road, who's gonna coordinate all this, right? Who's gonna decide who gets, you know, who gets priority?
yeah, but I don't think we need to worry about that
So-
now, right? That's sort of, I think right now we really, I mean, yes, whatever we do, somebody has to manage buildings, somebody has to coordinate space, someone has to vent line, whatever.
Some of these I see as not being that necessary, so with the Entrepreneur Suite, the co-working space, but I know there's places in, like there's empty office space in town, there's places in town that are already promoting co-working spaces. So I wouldn't see that, and again, the commercial retail unit space, or at least tenant office space. I think that there's enough of that already available in town that why would we, this is such a limited resource, like why would we be competing against stuff that's already in place? I think we should really be focusing on, you know, the art and culture.
Although I can see a little cafe, micro cafe, let's call it, at the train station. Just because trains are often late. I've taken the train to Toronto 2 weekends in a row and they were both over half an hour late each time. If I'm someone who's leaving St. Mary's and my train is over 45 minutes late and I really need a coffee and a strawberry or something, or if I've just gotten off the train, there's enough of a distance there where something could, it's not a priority item, but it's not worth leaving behind either necessarily. And I wouldn't want to see anything retail at 14th Church Street.
I know, it's hard to remember about those buildings.
Now, question about the tourism piece and where those desks are located. What about the train station for that area?
The only problem
serve
I
the
have, the
government.
train station is almost invisible. Like if you're visiting St. Mary's, it's way down there when you're driving and you don't.
There would have
see
to
it.
be a signage or something pointing in the direction.
Been there, done that, it just
Yeah.
didn't work.
It
It
doesn't work.
really just didn't work unless you got off the train and then there was a lot of information for you there, but truly it was just, they tried so many different ways to attract people to that train station, signage, all sorts of things.
Mhm.
But it just, unless, I can't see how, the situation would be improved.
Yeah, because it's difficult to, if you're a motorist, turn in and turn out.
Mhm.
You
But when
just,
you talk-
the tourism thing has to be downtown.
But when you talk, but the good thing about the train station is that privacy and that, you know, when we're talking about outreach space where people might appreciate a little more privacy for entrance and exit. And even potentially co-working or that kind of multi-use space that is a little quieter, not as busy, a little more privacy on the exterior. There might be something there potentially.
Well, that's where I'm looking at, the tourism office space, not necessarily where tourists will go, because there can be a little pamphlet area or whatever downtown as, you know, what's to offer, because I don't believe that the tourist people, the tourism staff actually receive tourists and give out information when they're in their office. Call.
Well, I
Yeah, I know.
I did.
Yeah.
That's what I did and.
Yeah.
And it just became, well, how do I put it? Like, when I was in a tourism role at town hall,
Mhm.
you know, reception would receive a person and they're like, oh, this person would like, you know, would like to learn more. And inevitably, even if that wasn't necessarily your role to be that frontline person.
That's where I'm going with
you
that.
became that
You're not-
frontline person.
Yeah, you're not the frontline person,
Yeah.
so there's the admin people doing the tourism
Mhm.
behind the scenes, and then there's the front person.
Yeah.
So we have to have offices within a space that are typically just admin or doing their job, and then there's the different component, which would be the receiving of the people. Instead of taking them away from the task and their job and their desk and such. So,
But then if the tourism admin is away from that front line, you're taking time away from the people who are at the front line and who may not have that tourism knowledge. And there's an expectation, if someone comes in the lower level of town hall, they see the row of brochures and whatnot.
I'm not
they see
saying
the-
lower level town hall, I
Yeah.
mean 14 Church and
Yeah.
the train station. So if there was a way for people to come into 14 Church Street, which is downtown as a
and
location for
receive.
information. And then having the admin portion of it in a different location, because we're looking at space constraints and how we're going to use the space downtown. Would it make sense to have the administration on the main floor? I mean, there's the upper level too, right? So I mean, that's another piece.
You would have to have a person that's trained in some way, shape or form in tourism at
Mhm.
that tourism welcome location.
So I think what we're saying is that we would like some sort of tourism function downtown,
Yes,
right? And then where we put the tourism staff, the actual, you know, management staff is a staffing decision that is in another step.
Mhm. We're saying,
But they're having some sort of tourism presence as part of this is important. We got it.
and
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
I see that tying in very well with the idea. In my own mind, I kind of see maybe the trains kind of things naturally evolving from where they already are. So the train station is already like an art hub and sort of a cultural hub, so maybe really developing the train station as that art and cultural hub. And then developing 14 Churches more of that community hub. So where you would have the library, I mean, it makes sense, the library is across the street. But also your outreach worker, for example, the library has a pretty robust pantry program now. So I think it makes sense to have your outreach worker there for, you know, people are already naturally gonna come to that space because of that. So really that being more of the community hub. But things like your poetry readings, yeah, I mean, it'd be great to have those at the train station or your black box, you know, there is that big space where we used to have this thing. That, you know, I could see that easily being like a black box, that you described. Maybe, maybe not.
It's scheduled around the train schedule.
Yeah, no,
The train only comes like twice a day now, like,
Oh, there's great.
oh, that's true.
yeah, no.
Where
I
is
mean,
it?
I think the train station is a lovely building. I think there are some programmatic challenges for a lot of things there.
Can I ask a question? I know we're not supposed to be down this road, but when you
Yeah.
guys talk about a black box space, like how big is a black box space? Are we talking like a room this size? Are we talking like a big room or John?
It could be this size.
Okay.
Um,
Well, it's a room
again,
this
there's
size.
just a limit on what sort of performances you can do.
It sounds like the old Mercury Theater was basically a black box.
From, I've only seen pictures of it.
It
And,
just
oh,
had
when I-
like 3 rows of like
It had a
risers.
balcony, but it also.
No balcony. They had a set and they used an existing staircase that was part of the building. when they-
Thought I saw pictures when I first read
But
the
it
article
was
in the
just
newspaper.
very, very intimate. I probably held maximum.
You're talking about two different areas.
40.
But John's talking about when it was a movie theater and you're talking about it when it was a
I'm
theater.
talking
Yeah.
about it when it was the Mercury Theater, which
Okay.
was basically just a group from Stratford that, well, he bought the building and that was amazing. We had Douglas Campbell came and did like the Christmas story and things like that. It was a fantastic.
Yeah.
Because he had all these contacts with Stratford actors, and this was an off-season for them.
Sure.
And, well, it was way too good to last,
Hmm.
basically.
Yeah.
But it was totally black, just inside 3 levels of seats, just bench seats.
Mhm.
And,
How
just a
many
small
would it have,
performance.
how large an audience could it have?
I would say 40, 50 people maximum.
Yes.
Over 40 probably more likely. I mean, it was totally impractical, but all very exciting.
And again, I'm looking at a multi-purpose space for lectures, meetings, 50 people, that can easily. They seem to go hand in hand. When I look at this list, the one that jumps out at me is leasable tenant space. Now, is the city hoping to make some revenue out of not having enough room in 14 Church? Because I frankly, that to me for the train station, if I was a small business and I wanted a really nice looking little building where I could run my business out of, that to me would be an inviting building, much more so than having a little corner of the top floor of 14 Church.
No, I think that's a good point. Like, I think,
Andrew?
I mean, we're not really, the point of tonight was not sort of to start allocating, I know, but I think you're making a point that, you know, some of these spaces, say the leasable tenant office space, if they wanted to do a co-space, if we wanted to do a commercial retail unit space. Those are destination type things where people aren't gonna mind going down to the station. It doesn't matter that it's off the track, doesn't matter that it's got limited parking, doesn't matter, none of that stuff matters, right? And they can work around, okay, fine, the train comes at 10 in the morning or whatever, and it's a little bit noisy for a few minutes, but you just know that. It's not interfering with programming or a theater or something else, right? So, and some of those things don't need to be downtown. You're still close enough to downtown, but you're not downtown, which then frees up 14 Church to have the more public type spaces, right? So whether that's tourism, gallery, library, the things that the public is going to engage with and is going to enhance the downtown could all be clustered in the more downtown space. Right?
Excuse me, what is maker space? What is that?
It's
Well, the library, that's a very popular program at the library, so they, I think we need to get a new one, but a 3D printer, for example. So, you know, most people don't have access to a 3D printer, they have access to it, they run creative programs up in the makerspace. Do lots of sort of arts and crafty stuff, and if there's a lot of programming, it's extremely popular.
Sewing machine, there's sewing machines, or I know
There
my,
was so.
my daughter's hockey team just went up there and made a bunch of,
Make buttons.
they can make buttons, like they made jerseys, so they got a vinyl press.
Oh, really?
Like, lots of just things, you go in and you make something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Community groups use it for like, you know, different.
And I think the one they have now at the library is too small.
Well,
It's just,
it's very small, and I mean, I know that the second floor is accessible. But it's not a great accessibility, it's a lift, so it's very slow, you need to like lock it and unlock it. So it's not perfect as far as accessibility. But it's really well used. I mean, the library, when you go to it now, it almost was chaotic, right? Because there's so much that's going on and there's so little space. But yeah, makerspace is definitely something that the library would be looking at. It'd be, again, that's something that is, that you can separate off to a different building.
One thing I wondered about is the storage space, and we're talking about this mixed use stuff, which means there may be certain things you have to move somewhere else, etc. And we were talking about the basement not being used, but when you think about this town, right, the archive for the museum is in the basement, and that's true elsewhere. So I don't know whether there's a potential for that. Like, I don't know, I know it's probably in crazy shape right now.
Yeah,
but
yeah, well,
Is
it's,
there a potential?
yeah, so we're not thinking of it as usable, like, say, public usable space right now. It could be, it very well could be. But I know our ultimate outcome for this project is for the basement to be in good enough shape to store things, or it's already been waterproofed.
It's dry.
It's dry now. It looks like heck right now because we pulled a lot of the bad concrete out, and at some point in the next phase of the process, we'll have a nice concrete floor down there. But it could very well serve as storage, or it could very well serve as, at one point in time we thought, well, could you put some staff offices down there with, find a way to get them some light, because you have to have light. Or could you have a smaller meeting room down there? Like there is an opportunity to use the basement there. It will be good usable space when we're done.
I want to see ceiling heights, do you think?
They're low. Yeah, it's low downstairs.
It's at least 8 feet.
Yeah, it's 8 feet, but it's
So
not.
it's too small, it's too short for a black box or a.
Yeah.
Children's programming.
Yeah, they're short. Yeah. But no, again, it'll be able to be used.
That's like, I don't know what the space needs are for the library in terms of storage. We were talking about the, friends of the library.
Well, I know for the friends of the library, there's always an issue with the basement. It's an ongoing issue, because they store all the books there for the books. The book sale is the major fundraiser for Friends of the Library. So Dr. Quinton is always like, all he wants to see is for that, basement in the library to be dry, and I just don't think it ever will be, right? Like, I just think that there's been many, many efforts to waterproof it, so. And also I think Friends of the Library were looking for storage space for costumes and things like that. So I could see that easily being in the basement, things you don't need to access every day, right?
Right.
But you're right, for a multi-purpose room, you do need to have space to store chairs. Because you're not always gonna want chairs there, or you're gonna, have to be able to reconfigure table setup, so there does have to be some storage.
It might be worthwhile to have Barb walk us through the library too, when we do 14 church as well, to explain makerspace and just to it's important to get a visual of some of the kids program and stuff that we do, and just when we get to the step that we're starting to lay things out, whatever, just to see what the library, how it functions now. Because it's great to say I want this or whatever, but to actually see it, I think it would help our understanding in terms of coordinating. So if we can maybe put that on the list. Yeah.
So is that something that you'd like to see before we give this list to A-Link?
I don't think that's necessary.
No, we can do that after.
I think we're gonna
Okay,
just, yeah.
so really, we haven't eliminated anything from our list.
Well, we have,
What did we eliminate?
I thought we weren't gonna do entrepreneurial space.
And the market space.
Right,
and market
yeah, I've got question marks with
And
that.
then I thought, are we gonna do municipal office space or not?
I hope so. Eventually.
Okay.
Only
Yeah.
in the basement.
Yes, I think we were. Commercial retail unit space, I thought we were kind of thinking that we would eliminate that because it would be in competition with.
Yeah.
Or if that was by James instead of downtown, I don't know.
Yeah, I
I
mean, I
really
think-
don't know.
Yeah,
I kind of asked a question, but I think we got on a tangent, but what, oh, sorry, performance space, that was the black box.
Yes.
Yeah.
That,
So, and I think, Andrew, I think when we bought it and this first, the public survey came out, people heard us buying Mercury Theater, and they assumed that there was gonna be some sort of theater component to it or some sort of performance space component to it. And then the strategic plan says, invest in arts and culture and theater and the forum, maybe other spaces, right?
right,
So it's on the list, but again, we're here tonight to hear from the committee whether or not you feel that's necessary. I know you've been part of community players before. You probably give us some insight, and same with Councilor Furman, she's been part of. Do we need extra space in the forum?
I think that the space upstairs at the town hall could be used, if there was a call for theater space. I don't know that we've had a large demand other than the community players.
in terms of theater space, I would say perhaps for like concert type space, but the town hall auditorium works beautifully for that. I don't see the need for an additional dedicated performance space, I would say.
I would agree with that,
Yeah.
yeah. If there was, like that 50, person space and someone wanted to do a play reading or some other little thing in a small, they could utilize that space as well as any other group for whatever reason that may be.
And
I've got another thought though.
Yes.
The makerspace, it could be maybe shared with, I would like to see kind of like master artists or someone that's a professional in their area that loves to teach. And they travel with teachables to come to different spaces, and that would be something people would travel to and sign up for and come and learn within the space and come away with whatever that is. So that's slightly different than a maker space, but it might be able to function.
Yeah, well, when I talked to Sarah at the library, when I initially went to talk to her just about the art gallery, we talked about that sort of how a makerspace and an art gallery studio space could be, joint space, like you could. The properly designed space could function for both uses, right? Because you're not doing art classes every day, but, you could arrange it around the makerspace schedule, right? So I think that, and that's why, in my view, but this is not my opinion, it's your opinion. I think having a gallery and a library adjacent to each other is a good use, because there's a lot of shared, you both do lectures, you both do, creative making, you need quiet space, but not quiet space. You're both public space, like there's a lot of overlap, shared synergy between the two.
Yeah, and I think from the library's perspective, yeah, we would really welcome that, because the idea of the library is to make things accessible to people who otherwise wouldn't have access to it. So if there was, part of the makerspace, if there's sort of, studio areas and we can make that available, I think that absolutely.
Well, I'm thinking it's probably someone that runs it as a business and we want to have people sign up and pay for.
Yeah,
maybe
so I would sort of from the library's perspective, the things we don't charge people.
Yeah, I know, that's
So
why I mean,
that's-
it would be a joint, it would be.
So that's why I would have, I'd have to think about that, because the whole idea is that this is accessible, community accessible space.
Mhm.
There's lots of, we do have lots of retail businesses where they are offering classes, right? Like you can take pottery classes and pay for it at Zenfire Pottery. Paint and palette they charge. So I would see it more as, we're offering like studio space for maybe teenagers who really wanted to do some artwork. And they don't have, maybe the school closes at 3:30 and they can't use their studio at the school. So I would see that more as a shared space, but.
Well, I guess what I'm looking at is tourism again, a way to bring people that aren't in St. Mary's to St. Mary's. And so if you offer something that is something that is a class that people pay for, and it doesn't have to be painting and it doesn't have to be pottery, but it can be something other than those things that brings people to the town so that they end up here, they explore the town, they shop downtown, they eat downtown.
And I think it's Melissa at Riverwork Commons, across from the Canadian Tire. She's created an event space where she does rent it out to people. So a purpose like
Yeah.
that would be
That's true, too.
very compatible with what she's trying to do at
Yeah.
Riverwork Commons. You know, she gets some rental from it. It helps the, tourism of the town. It helps what's going on. And, somebody could rent that. So I think, there are, other spaces in town that do serve some needs, right?
Mhm.
That the town doesn't have to fill all the needs. Because you've got entrepreneurs that are doing things, or the couple that just bought, I guess a year ago, not the Lyric, the other flower store.
Oh,
Then they've
Yeah,
got the
they do the
space
workshops
upstairs,
and-
and right now it's filled with plants, but their goal is to make that available to people to do workshops and classes and things up there too. So I think there's, other spaces in town that we can use, the town does not have to fulfill every need, right?
Mhm.
It's like, what needs do we feel that the town needs to support, right? And I think that's where the discussion of, do we need to have commercial retail, does the town need to get into the commercial real estate business? If you've got enough space and you're making money off it, maybe that's a nice earned income thing for the town, but is that the best use of town space when you've got community needs, right?
Yeah, and I really do, I think tourism is important, but I think we really have to. This is a building for St. Mary's and for the people of St. Mary's, and, if it brings in tourists, that's great, and I think having the tourist office, that's great, but I think we really want to focus on, this is our taxpayers are funding this big project, and so it should be for the benefit of our St. Mary's residents. But that's just sort of how
I like
So will the space be,
concept too.
will the share, the spaces available, will they be a rent for those, or are they expected to be free as well?
I don't think we've got to that point yet.
Yeah.
That's kind of another step down the line. I think at this point, we're really just trying to figure out, what do we want? Like, what do we want, what do we need, right? And then we sort of decide, how does that space, or the architects decide, how does that work into square footage? How does it work into the two buildings that we have? Like, what is the best use? And then they're gonna come back with some sort of proposed ideas of probably some visuals for us to look at that sort of say, we're gonna do this. And then we still have the option of going, okay, that's great. Like, they've done this with the library. There's gonna be a multipurpose space that can be used for, lectures and black box and whatever. But we don't like where they've kind of conceived it, or we think it needs a bit more space or a bit less space. So we have a lot of opportunities over the next little while to kind of fine tune it, but we need to give the architects an idea of what we want them to work with, right? Because otherwise they're gonna come up with what they think is the best thing for us, and they're not you, right? You live in this town, you have friends in this town, you have colleagues in this town, you have family in this town, you know what this town needs. The architects are architects, which are great, but they don't know what you want and you need. So that's what this process is about, figuring out what we want. So that we can tell the architects, so that they can come up with something that meets our needs, and also that we're not going back and forth a million times and racking up architectural fees.
I just have one question, and I don't want to get off topic, whatever, but I'm just curious, it's come up a couple times about the train station. Right now, the train station is kind of used for community uses. And I'm getting the sense that there is no real attachment to that building, that the town would use it for strictly commercial purposes.
And what I find is they have an attachment to the building, right? The people like the idea of old train stations. There's a definite nostalgia around old train stations. I think you could make it so that it does have some commercial uses. Like when Brett and I were first talking, and we were just sort of brainstorming on our first meeting, I said that, if somebody asked me what to do with it, I would probably, the main area just in front, like the gallery area now, where the ticket office is, because that would be as long as Via's using that, they've got a ticket office, that's a hard commercial space. Nobody wants people traipsing through their business. I would probably do, and I don't know how Amy feels about this, and I think she's on this call, isn't she? I would probably do some small static history exhibition that is safe, that doesn't need to be monitored all the time. That is a nice little welcome to St. Mary's, history of St. Mary's in that space, so that people that are coming through the train station get this nice little like, oh, I'm learning about a little bit about St. Mary's while I'm waiting for the train. And then you could use the other spaces as commercial space. But have some kind of minimal public use for it. And I mean, again, I have not talked to Amy about this, sorry, Amy. But
She would be entirely in favor of that. I think.
I mean, I
That,
know.
that would be so easy to do.
Yeah.
I mean,
Easy within the realm.
yeah,
You know,
but it's a very doable, suggestion.
Yeah, and I think that, I know for running art galleries is you always have way more stuff in storage than you have room for. So being able to take some of those things out of storage that are safely, it's gonna cost a little bit of money to build the proper cases and things so things are safe, but you don't have to change it every 6 months. You know, it can be a static exhibition for a period of time and it's a nice little feel
Or it
good.
could be a teaser for
Yeah.
what the museum
It goes
is
to
doing,
museum,
right?
exactly.
So like just a little bit of, we're doing.
Yeah.
Doing something on World War I, so you just have a few things and then
Yeah, like-
that kind of invites people to go to the museum.
Yeah, Amy and her team would be perfect, they would come up with some amazing ideas, right? But I have not talked to Amy about this, so I apologize. But I think that having a minimal, because I just think having been in the station, thinking about how the gallery should use the station a lot. That gallery space is problematic because you've got the access going to and from the train, and so you can't really rent that out to somebody else. But you could rent out the other offices on either side, right? If we wanted to do something that is,
One of the reasons the gallery works is people are waiting for their late train. So they look at all the art that's there. So, but the same thing, if you put an exhibit in for the museum, the same thing, people are always looking at something.
yeah. And I think again that, we have to credit Cameron for doing an amazing job with what he's done there, right? Especially, with the limitations of resources and the space and all those sort of things, so. But, I think that, his plan certainly was, and I think anybody that goes at Duncan who's taking over. Is, to start doing classes and to do more there, and, that's more difficult to do in that space, but then if we're looking at multi-purpose spaces in the town. Having education space that might be in a multi-purpose room or in a makerspace or whatever makes sense, because again, this is a town of, 7,200 people. Right, something around there. So you don't, you have limited resources, limited audience, right? You don't need a bunch of dedicated spaces for a bunch of dispersed things, right?
One of the problems with the station gallery is because of that traffic, and you've got art pieces that are worth some money, there's a real problem. And so, Cameron's been able to sort of deal with that, but it's not ideal at all.
Yeah.
It's too bad because it's a wonderful little building.
Mhm. And I think people would be, from my reading of, talking to people in town, they'd be horrified if something happened at the train station. They love the train station. And I think they like the idea of being able to go into the train station and that there's something there. But I don't think it means that it has to be 100% public space, or it has to be the art gallery, or it has to be whatever. I think you can make a public area, which is kind of your lobby for the train, and then utilize the other space in different ways that could be revenue generating.
Yeah, one thing this town should be really proud of is the way so many buildings have been adaptively reused. Everything from, Central School to think of the thing called the Creamery, it's had about 4 different uses over time, etc. And that's really what we're doing now. And it's terrific because there are other places like London, Ontario, where the first option is just to tear it down. And they do a lot of that.
So I think I think the takeaways are that, we want community, we want multi-use spaces. We want the public to feel welcome. We definitely want library functions over there, programming and makerspace probably being the top 2. And then if there's a place for the Friends of the Library to store things that is dry and safe, would be a definite plus. Some tourism function that's downtown.
The outreach space.
The outreach space, yeah. Anything else? Anything we're missing?
Well, did we include art gallery? I think that that's some.
We didn't,
It's on the list.
it's on the list, yeah.
Yeah, but
We
it's,
didn't- we didn't
this
dis-
is, but
we
as a
didn't-
priority, I think.
Do you think that's a priority?
Well, I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I think some space for exhibiting.
Yeah,
I would say, yeah, maybe we should call it an exhibition space instead of an
Yeah,
art
I
gallery.
think that's better.
I don't really see a huge difference between art gallery and local art display.
Yeah. Well,
I
that's a
do,
bit-
but
I know,
I'm
well,
not a
yeah.
person.
Yeah, and
But-
exhibition
but
space,
I
I think.
think that for a town of 7,200,
But
should there necessarily be a difference? Now, I don't want to speak for the arts group because I'm not a member, but I have worked with them in the past, just on logistic things and trying to seeing if they'd be willing to do kind of more shows as different community events went on, and it was challenging. Like, is it a matter of maybe there's a local art display fit into the annual gallery schedule?
yeah, I think
That
I
kind
mean,
of,
so I mean, if I was the curator of the art gallery, I would certainly have a local component. I would probably do kind of major exhibition in the summer tourist months, like do something where you're bringing in something interesting and exciting. It might be local, it might not. I would have a space for the local artists to definitely show, and do, you know, it could be a group show, it could be a 1 or 2 person show. I would do something with schools, which I think Cameron does. I know Cameron does that. I think that's a really important thing. He does elementary school students. I tend to do high school students because I think it's an important time for them to sort of be developing their artwork and preparing portfolios for university or whatever. With some kind of educational component, and then you could fit, you know, something else in there. Like, you don't need, I mean, Cameron's got this incredibly ambitious every 4 weeks changing exhibition schedule, which is, you know, crazy making, but he does it successfully. You don't need to do that, you know, you could spread out your
Yeah.
exhibitions. And so, yes, you need a space for the local artists. I think that an art gallery is a tourist draw, like you definitely make it into, as part of this whole thing, having a professionally run art gallery in your downtown core is another thing for tourists to do.
Oh, yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that at all. I'm just saying I don't, for a town of our size and with our resources, I don't necessarily see the two as being separate items.
No, they could be shared.
Because there's also many businesses downtown that showcase local artists' works on an
Yeah.
annual basis, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not trying to diminish our local artists, but there are opportunities, and they do have an annual show at Christmas time, which is awesome and a great weekend. But in the interest of designing the space, I'm not necessarily seeing separate.
I don't think you need, I agree with you. I think in a town of this size, in a building floor plan that we're looking at, having 2 exhibition spaces would be a lot of real estate.
Yeah.
Unless you had, like, I think of this one art gallery I worked at in Georgia, and we had like our main exhibition spaces, like that we did our proper exhibitions. And then we had a multi-purpose room that we used for weddings or meetings or rentals or whatever. And that's where we showed local artists on the walls in there. So we still did an opening for them. We had like a weekend where it was just the gallery, but it was also work that was decoration, for lack of a better word, for other events, right? But people could still, like, when there wasn't a wedding going on or there wasn't an event, it was open like the rest of the gallery was, and people could walk in and look at the artwork, right? So
That's interesting, because there's gonna be a lot of walls in this new facility. That.
So I mean, again,
There'll
I
probably
think
be a
that
lot of walls.
it's about, when we get to this next stage, it's about how do we creatively utilize these different spaces? Like, you know, how many, you know, if we think about, okay, we've got a makerspace, like, we want the library to have, you know, first dibs, that's their space. But what else can happen in the makerspace, right? If we're going to do a multi-purpose room, what else can be there? Can that be the black box? I mean, you have to make sure you've got a rig there that you can put lighting up, like you've got to design that into it, but it could also function as a black box. It could function as art gallery for certain things. It could function as, you know, like a dry studio space or a dance studio. Like there's different ways you can make any one of these spaces, well, not every one of them, but a lot of these spaces have multiple uses, right? And how do we, and I think that's what community hubs are about, cultural hubs are about, is that you're trying to bring people together and you're sharing ideas and you're sharing synergy and you're sharing creative, like it's a place where people can come together and be more than they were when they're just on their own.
I do have one thought about the performance space and where people, was the thought sort of thinking as, you know, a whole cultural look. You know, like offering all the cultural services, like practice rooms for instruments, something like that. Is that something maybe that was being considered for the performance space?
I don't know, because I wasn't, but I mean, I think that is like, I don't know how many of you have been to the Idea Exchange in Cambridge? Anybody? So Cambridge Galleries became Idea Exchange. And they built, or they took over the old post office building that's right on the Grand River.
Oh, I've been there.
Yeah. And so they've got a makerspace in there, they've got a music room down there, I think they've got a little video film area, they've got a whole bunch of different spaces that can be used in different ways, and it's hopping with young people. You
That's what
know,
I'm thinking, if there was like performance, you know, like rooms, the soundproof, I mean, it's probably pretty expensive, but soundproof rooms for students who need to practice. Like,
But I mean,
should
but
we be thinking art gallery, we're thinking library, but should we also be thinking about?
and I think it's about then when there's, I mean, because again, you've got your box, right? That you just need the architects to make sure that they put, and if you've got a theater in there, you probably want some soundproofing anyway, right? Or even for meetings, having a bit of soundproofing doesn't hurt, right? So it's just a matter of when you're designing, when we get to the design stage, we, you know, give the architects the brief of, these are the intended uses of that space. Like we want it to be a music space, we want it to be all these.
Well, the
different-
makerspace, you could certainly be looking at filming, right?
Yeah.
Having this option, so.
I mean, I just remember, like, this is off track, but we lived in Colorado for a while, and a suburb of Denver is Arvada. And the Arvada Center, which was built, as we were in Colorado in 92, it was built before we got there. And it had, Arvada's a bigger community, but it had a proper theater space. It had a place for the, so it had a concert hall that the symphony could be there, but they also had a theater space. They had the museum there, they had an art gallery, they had dance studios, they had they had wet studios and dry studios. So that you could have, you know, theater groups could practice there, or you could have a, you know, some art thing that was dry and clean. But then they also had a place with sinks and whatever, and they had an event space, and it was a big facility, then outdoor amphitheater where they had performances. But every time we went there, it was busy and hopping. Like there was just, I've never been in that space where there weren't a bunch of things going on. And it was that, you know, you take your kid to dance class, but then you can go to the gallery, or you're going to the theater and you can walk into something else, or you're going to a wedding. And I think that, and this was, you know, 30 years ago, and they were doing that. So, and now here we are in, you know, 24, and a lot of communities are just starting to think about these cultural hubs. And there's examples of really successful ones in different places around the world that have functioned, and they're vibrant and they're still going. And so I think that, but it's about having spaces that can have multiple uses.
But I don't want the library to lose its programming.
No. But I mean, there are,
For thoughts, but.
yeah, but I mean, you can still have, you know, dedicated space. Like obviously the museum wasn't letting just anybody use their museum space, right? But there were enough shared use spaces in the facility, right? And it was about bringing things together. I think was my point, right? You're bringing a whole bunch of things together under one roof, and it makes it vibrant, and I think that's what Cambridge has done with their Idea Exchange. Is that you've got the Idea Exchange building, but then the Queen Square Library has a gallery in the library. Preston's got the gallery in the library, so, they brought two uses
I think a
together.
gallery and a library are a good fit.
Yeah, and there's, Grimsby does that, there's, half a dozen communities at least in Ontario that
I
have
mean,
library
you could, you
gallery,
could lend out paintings, for example.
yeah.
A library could.
So there's natural synergy, like libraries and galleries, I think museums and galleries, there's some natural things that fit together, but. It's about, we've got this opportunity to create this space and what do we want?
Yeah, again, as I said, from my perspective, I'm not that interested in control. Leasing things like that, but really making this for the community.
Yeah.
So a community hub.
I want to throw in one thing. You mentioned maybe practice rooms for instruments. At Laurier, I've lived with it as the manager of the theater, and we always had the faculty of music wanting to literally put practice rooms in the foyer and what have you. And I kept saying there's no such thing as a truly soundproof room. And so then you got into this thing, well, if you're practicing your flute in that far room, okay, but you can't be practicing a trumpet or drums.
We could say no drums.
But I mean, these are things, drums are an example of where parents are gonna say, hey, if there's a space in town where you can bring your drum kit, set up and go for a couple hours, I think there'd be
And that's
demand
what
for
the
that.
basement is gonna be for.
Even so, it'll travel right through the whole room, or right through the whole building.
I probably shouldn't even mentioned it, but I was just thinking if we're talking
But-
about a cultural hub.
But again, for small, who knows, small jazz band at the high school, if once the high school's closed, they want to practice on their own at night, that would be a great thing to throw in there, but I would say at that point, schedule it so I think a lot of this is going to come down to scheduling. A lot of the library demands, I'd be curious, are you talking about anyone can wander in there anytime from 9 o'clock or do you have to sign up? How much would a dedicated maker space actually be used? Or would it be used from 9 in the morning till the doors close at night? Or any of the other,
Well, so the makerspace is probably gonna be used more in the afternoon and evenings, and it's
Okay.
gonna be used during the day. But it is well used.
okay,
It's definitely, I would say, the library, it's what makes the library vibrant, and what people use the library for now are the programming and the makerspace.
Mhm.
People still go to the library to take out books, but it's really, I mean, it really is a community hub, and like it's.
But these things are already operating now. Is there I mean, I think it would be useful in deciding, oh no, that has to be a dedicated space. It could,
I don't think, I'm not saying the library is gonna insist that any space be a dedicated space, I'm just saying, I do see. I mean, I do wanna just remind the committee that, the library it has actually had a space and needs. Study done and has, there have been specific recommendations of what the library needs.
Yeah.
The library has been sort of told we're gonna get so many square feet, so I think we have to keep those parameters.
granted, but.
Furthermore, that your scheduling will change as space was available.
Yeah.
This would offer more opportunities, and the scheduling is down to the library staff ultimately anyway. And the demand that they.
Yeah, I mean, I think, how many book clubs does the library have now? I think it's got 3 or 4 book clubs. So,
Is that 3 or 4 nights a week? Is that?
no, I doubt it, but I'm just saying, like, as more space is available.
More-
probably there'll be
more-
There'll be more demand, yeah.
It might be interesting at the next meeting if you, or if the library could have just sort of, and it needn't be down to, down to the decimal point, but just bring like a monthly schedule in
Well, I think
activities.
if you read through the space and needs study, like it's a very detailed study, so I think it has been provided. But it's been a long time, like it's almost 2 years since we met the last time, but I know that the space and needs study has been provided, so, I mean, it does talk about it. Everything in there's some pictures of what it looks like when there's both programming. always have to be a little bit careful about pictures and especially when you have children involved, right? But,
There's definitely a need for the space. There's
Yes.
absolutely
Yeah,
a need for the space, but I understand that, but I think what the need is for the committee is to see an actual schedule that's in place now, how that's used
Yeah.
weekly or monthly, knowing that with the new space, there'll be an increase in programming because it's probably going to be something that the library is going to, want to embrace and offer more. But there's still gonna be lots of opportunity to share the space.
and I think
that's-
what, when we talked about before, is probably the library would be responsible for scheduling those
Maybe.
spaces, maybe.
Maybe. Now that I'm starting to think, Barb, I'm gonna be like, just being candid. I don't think anybody's made a commitment ever that it's gonna be 26 or 2,700 square feet dedicated just solely for the library to have and manage. I think we were always very clear with our messaging back to Sarah that this has to be multi-purpose shared space, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's funny, just as John was mentioning it, that's what I was writing down, like when we look at shared spaces, we're going to figure out things that have complementing schedules, right? So programming space that could be used for early on during the day, but in the evening could be used that if somebody wanted to book something through the town to do exactly what Fern said, is we actually want to put on a paid program that they could do that. I think that was always council's vision, that if somebody really did want to come in, if we don't want to go to Riverwalk Commons and we don't really want to go down to Peyton Pal, we want to book this space and put on an art class, they could do that, right? That kind of sharing works.
The other thing that'll come too is that there'll clearly be spaces that are accessible and not accessible at certain times of the day, right?
Yeah.
You know, if you're talking about doing, I don't know, say an art gallery or something, if that's a space that may not be accessible all the time, right? So that's gonna have to become part of the multi-use as well. Or whatever.
I think there's a role for the library to manage it. But again, just constructive criticism that we've realized through our space needs studies that the library right now is not the greatest at scheduling. Where on the town side, we are pretty good. So it may end up coming down to the town that is the eventual arbiter of a priority, right? And again, that's kind of like when we've talked to Sarah about thinking about how she really wants to use the space going forward, that's why we've always challenged her to say that you have to think about it as, because at one point in time, there was a notion of you should move all the stacks over there, but like that might actually be in conflict with how this space is used if it ends up being, having the first floor is just chopped up into like 4 really big rooms, right? And we find a way to share them and use them and all that kind of good stuff. I think that's really what it's gonna be difficult to talk about until we see floor plans. But again, shared flexible use spaces that everybody can use, I think is what I know council was always kind of clear with me on what they wanted to see. And I think what we've heard here today, like I've heard it a lot of times, I love hearing that, like it's something for the community. And John's right, how we schedule it is really gonna come down to how it works. Because I honestly think we could do it I think everything you've talked about tonight would all, I don't think anybody's had an idea that wouldn't work in either of those 2 buildings. With creative scheduling and a good floor plan design.
Yeah, because even the music space where your practice space doesn't have to be in 14 Church, it could be in 5 James. Although.
As the train's going by.
Yeah, right, like competing with.
Bang,
trains,
the train goes by.
Oh, there is something to be said for trying to centralize all those things. So, if you're a mom and you're coming down and
Yeah.
you're probably fine with your kid being across the street practicing the trumpet, but maybe not feeling so good about your kid being, at the train station. So just sort of keeping that in mind too, with the community space.
Not just the synergy of, you're going into a program, but then you sort of see that there's a makerspace, or you see that there's an art gallery, you see that there's something else that kind of expands your horizons of what's available, right?
Yeah.
Rather than having to go to a bunch of different, so.
We always call it a campus, right? A campus of
Yeah.
services. Now we're talking about a cultural campus, which
Yeah.
it's just.
It's very exciting.
But
Yeah.
nobody's using space like 100% of the time.
Yeah.
I think where I work, we have this beautiful commons, but not used all the time. And certainly we, invite the community in to use that all the time. I'm a little bit worried about charging people, but that's a discussion a lot further down the line.
Yeah. I'm just curious about, this kind of our blue sky ideas. Kind of test driving an art gallery in an unfinished space where you bring in an exhibit of someone that has some notoriety that would draw people into the town.
That would.
Add some notoriety.
And,
I was born in St. Mary's.
yeah, and even St. Mary's or beyond or wherever, and taking that space that's unfinished and seeing how that, if that has some sort of attraction, if it brings people
I mean,
to.
to do art exhibitions before the building's
Yeah,
completed.
because the building may sit empty for a little while.
I mean, I love that challenge as a curator.
Yeah, just,
Maybe some health and safety issues with that.
No, I mean, yes and no. I mean,
Well,
it
first
depends.
off, it's not rated for fire, it's the one right off the bat, so I don't, building inspector. can let
Well, you have to get occupancy permit from the building department, which you at least have to get the building renovated to the point you can get occupancy.
Yeah,
Which means you have to have like certain, you know, health and safety, so you'd have to have bathrooms, you would have to have fire, you'd have to have all that good stuff.
But I agree, having an art gallery in the town gives people a reason to come to town.
Yeah.
And I love the idea, like, from the first time I walked through that building after the town purchased it and just walking into the, you know, the main area where the theater was. If I can really blue sky, I just envision walking in and hopefully all those windows remain as they are because the light is gorgeous in the morning and having that as like your public art gallery kind of space. And then there is sort of some kind of, you know, what do you hear, you know, reception, for lack of a better word, welcoming desk that can provide a bit of tourism assistance, but also direct you where you need to go in this wonderful building. And then more private areas branching off of there. That's a welcome for a tourist or a resident to walk into a really stunningly beautiful. It's like, how high are the ceilings projected to be on the?
Yeah, so actually, we're, so right now, the first floor kind of intersects in around here. Straight across. But we have, I know Grant and his team's plan is to reestablish windows in this area. But what's really interesting when we happen is if you see this little rectangle here, the bottom side of that is a roof truss. So you have to think of, this is about 11 feet. And then this originally was gonna be just a little bit over 8 feet to the bottom of the truss. But we've had, there was a lath and plaster ceiling there, and there's also one up and around here. So we've actually had both removed. And so right now, the vision is that we're gonna actually insulate the underside of the roof so that we can establish the ceiling height higher. And then we would encourage the architect to leave these roof trusses all exposed, so you have a bit more of an industrial feel.
Oh,
But
cool.
then you gain all that headroom up to the roof. So then this actually goes from being 8 feet and getting closed. Now you actually can activate all of these windows up on the second floor as well. So it should be nice and spacious.
And I know we don't want to compete, but it would be really nice if it's a community hub of people have a place to sit and have a coffee. Or their kids are practicing volleyball somewhere far away.
Dream about kids practicing, it's trying to, I don't know how you do it.
Yeah. I thought my office would be over there.
Practice space.
oh my God.
Yeah, so it should be, again, I know, the building department staff are really favoring and leaning towards very light, very airy.
Yeah, I think that's what
It's,
everyone.
with 2 floors, you don't get that same feeling, you know, when you walk from a floor of it being open from floor to ceiling, but the hopefully open in floor plan layout, and then same thing upstairs, but more in floor plan layout.
It'd be something that we would consider doing what's it called, request for interest in using space within.
If you were to go
building.
commercial,
Well, I don't know, yeah, I just don't know.
again, I think as at the committee level here, like, through this process, you'll give us as a staff level, very clear direction on if commercial retail unit makes sense and where you put it. So if it was gonna go, say, let's say we just decided that James Street North was gonna be, you know, Angela's vision of, you know, a nice little museum pop up that Amy is, or Mary's committed Amy to, which I think is good. And then some retail space, and that's exactly what we do, is just, we just put an RFP and RFI.
Yeah.
Ask anybody, ask who wants to use it.
It's just interesting, you know, we've got some opportunities with the quarry and it's brought people into town. And so again, I'm wondering what's out there that we don't know about that may bring people to our downtown. Yeah, like we're just not aware that this is out there. It might be perfect.
Well, the other advantage of having this hub is that it's a chance to advertise all those other businesses in town, right? Like the paint and palette and the Zen Fire pottery. So that's why I think it does make sense to have like the tourism presence in that hub.
And having run art galleries most of my career, reception areas of art galleries tend to be, you know, unofficial tourist offices. I mean, people go to art galleries and ask for tourist information, like you have to know what's going on in town, you have to be able to give restaurant recommendations, you have to say what your favorite shops are, you have to know what's on at the festival, like you just, galleries just by their nature, because again, they're the free public space that people go to when they're on vacation. You tend to be the tourism thing. So, I mean, that is again, you know, if we want to have a tourism presence and we want to have an art gallery, we want to have a community hub, you know, maybe you just, that's part of staffing the art gallery is that the art gallery front desk person is also a trained tourist person, right? Because I mean, I would just do that with my staff anyway, like encourage them to make sure they know what's going on and we would have information there for them so that, you know, even volunteers can do that.
So just another question then about, if the staff were for tourism downtown, would that be part of their just job description to go and man that tourist hub?
Across the street?
No, well, yeah, like if their offices were in 14 Church, would that be part of the expectation is when somebody walks in, they would leave their position and
Yeah,
go and
it could
deal
be,
with them
yeah.
and then go back and sit down? and
It
do
could,
it?
yeah, it could be no different than what Andrew's already described happens.
Yeah, I know.
If somebody comes in and says, hey, we want to talk about tourism, and they come out and they deal with that.
And that would be, yeah, within, okay, so they would man that station?
It could be, right, and
Yeah, it could be, but then that kind of leads to the idea that there needs to be office space on the first floor of the Mercury Theater.
That they
to
can
be
see the
convenient.
front when, yeah.
Yeah, or that they could arrive in a timely fashion, whereas in my blue sky, I don't envision a lot of, especially not necessarily municipal office space on the first floor.
No.
At all.
Yeah, that's where I was wondering.
But I think the nice thing is like, I think I know anytime we've spoken to Sarah is that I guess my expectation is that any person, any staff member who works in a frontline role, whether it be at town hall, in tourism, or even at the library, they're ambassadors of the town and they're knowledgeable enough. And that's one thing Sarah had always communicated to us through this is that people regularly go into the library already thinking that there's tourism information there and the library staff already act in that function. So just as Angela said, all of the staff would be cross-trained to say, yeah, like, here's the pamphlets, you know, we have a walking tour, we have this, we have this, we have this. Like, most of these staff who work, they want to do this anyways. They want to be helpful. They want to share the information. So I'm not overly worried about it being, you know, the economic development manager or the actual tourism assistant being the person that has the conversation, as long as.
So the
those-
library staff might be the people that are handling
Yeah,
that.
they're already doing
component.
that. Yeah, they're already doing that. When town hall closes and isn't open on Saturday, they walk into the library and ask the question.
Or they go to Cameron at the.
Yeah, or they go to Cameron at the train station, so that the staff.
Or the
already do
museum.
this. Or
Yeah,
the
That's
museum.
what the museum
Or,
also
yeah,
has.
any of those.
Yeah, the museum, actually, the museum in recent years has really become a place where people stop first to
Yeah,
get tourism information.
Yeah, they do. And there's, and also some very, very helpful stores downtown that are, I mean, I don't think people,
Yeah, I guess
they'll get answers whenever they ask questions.
I think, what I'm wondering is, you know, we had another staff member, so all of the expenses that come up when we add another staff member for this position and do all those things. And I'm just looking at the bottom lines of what that's gonna cost. And then,
I think when
It
you,
can be shared.
if you start projecting into your operating model in the
Yeah.
long term, a lot of, you know, despite what I said to Barb, a lot of the space is going to end up being used for library purposes. So the library will have to find a way to staff over there, probably with existing staff. So that you're gonna have staff there on the weekends who are, I said, already doing this work. I look at, again, using names like Kelly's job as to, just to make sure that everybody has the information they need, they have the resources, they're ready they're ready to greet people, they're ready to be that, again, an ambassador for the town. And I don't think it's a far stretch, because as I said, the libraries aren't doing it. They're open on a Saturday morning, and somebody pops in, they're already doing it.
I think there will be staffing implications. for
Yeah,
sure.
there's going to be, yes.
But I don't think you necessarily want your economic development and tourism staff that are, you know, trained, experienced people spending their time doing front desk meetings, right? That,
Yeah,
I mean, that can be a summer student job, that can be a, you know, trained volunteer job. Like, there's other people that can do that job. You don't want to take your senior level staff and have them doing frontline work, I don't think. I think it's good to be in touch with it, but not, you know, that's not their job. Okay, I think. Are we good?
Well, you tell me, Angela.
I think I'm good.
You have to be good to then go write
Yeah.
something up for A-Link.
Yeah, I can write something up for anyone. Anything else anybody wants to add?
Has this been useful?
It has, yeah.
So,
And I think you all have my email address on the email, right?
No, I'll send it out. So I think, you know, John stepped away, but in fairness, because the agenda, we will do better next time to make sure the agenda actually gets in your hand. I think it's just a function of BC seeing everybody.
But so at the library now, we just need to include the link.
Yeah.
Because it's already.
and
it's
she
already
did,
posted.
she included the link, but it was a very small,
Yeah.
it was very easy to miss. It was a second email.
Andrea, John's junk. So
I mean, I couldn't find it, but I thought, well, I'm gonna go and see
Yeah.
if there isn't, I thought, maybe this will be a surprise. But no, there wasn't a chance.
no, unfortunately, it wasn't. Yeah, I didn't mean to be surprised. So I think you'll have some time to reflect, and I'll send out Angela's contact information
Yes.
so that if there are any. I think what we're really trying to seek out tonight, was it useful? Yes. Because I think what keeps happening in this project is everybody, whether it be staff, we're not all perfectly aligned. We all have our own special use we want to put here, but for the most part, there's a common theme that keeps emerging. And what we really wanted to hear tonight from the committee was whether that common theme emerged or not, and it did. And then it gives us the opportunity to go back to A-Link and they, you know, through feedback with Angela, they'll start slotting things over into the different buildings. And then, yeah, and then next meeting, that's where the debate really starts happening about does it really actually make the most sense, that you really start deciding on the vision of what each of these is going to look like, so we can get ready to go to that design. But if there's anything you felt that we've missed, I think take the time to digest tonight and we circle back to Angela, and again, it'll get added on there, and A-Link will do their best to put it in the right spot. We'll debate it. We're probably looking at the next sit-down meeting in February. But I think what we wanted to get out of tonight, to get a sense from committee members, when you would like to go on a tour to see the train station, to see the library, and then to see what 14 Church Street looks like today.
Oh, anytime.
Anytime?
January, for sure.
It's just, and given that it's, you know, winter time, it would have to be during the lighted hours. So if we could do it either, I know Barb, sometimes your work schedules, I always like to navigate
Work
around.
every, I work every day.
Navigate around, right? But so it's either early in the
So
morning or at night.
I would just have to know in advance, like if Thursdays I'm in court, and it's pretty.
Which day you're for?
I said if Thursdays I'm in court, it's pretty difficult for me to be.
Can we do a doodle poll of some dates in January?
Yeah, I'll just, if you don't mind, then I'll go back to the office tomorrow. I'll just pick a few random dates that seem to work and.
Yeah.
There.
The library would be good in the morning when it's, you know, got children lots and we can
Yeah.
see where the
Well,
balance.
that's why I think it's important to get kind of a sense of what the space they're using. It doesn't, well, respectfully, it doesn't come over paper sometimes.
No.
You know,
I guess
even
then,
Baker Street.
rather than picking dates, is there a particular day, we're just talking about it, lining up the tour, John. Is there a particular day of the week that works better?
Friday may be usually better for
Fridays.
me, although my Fridays in January are pretty busy, so having said that, maybe not.
I would prefer to not do Mondays and Wednesdays tend to be busier for me.
Tuesday, if it's just in the morning, I might be able to work a Tuesday morning. Although I have more for in the morning, yeah.
We're talking about tour dates.
Yeah, I'm retired and doing it, so I'm,
So why, yeah, just send out some dates.
in all likelihood,
See what they look like.
And John, what I'd said was just because the agenda didn't get out properly this time, I'll circulate again, just the link to the agenda again tomorrow and then Angela's contact information. And if there are any sort of blue sky ideas that we should add to that use list.
Mhm.
And
We're just thoughts that, you know, because
Yeah.
often you think of things when you, I mean, I know I do, I think of things when I leave, or sometimes you've got an idea that maybe you just don't want to float in front of a bunch of other people, and you want to just share it privately. Yeah, anything you want to share, that's gonna help the process and open to.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
That was extremely, well presented, a well coordinated
Oh,
discussion.
thank you.
We really appreciate it. I guess, we're looking for a motion to adjourn. Nobody wants, oh, okay. Okay, Andrea. That's not again, please.
Merry Christmas, everyone. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. Look forward.